Well, I want to address supply chain because I know it's a hot topic on a lot of manufacturers' minds and certainly in the industry as a whole. Uh, is our supply chain vulnerable for GLP-1s? And if so, how do we overcome that? Hyung, do you wanna weigh in?
Well, I think Doug and Deepa touched on this before, but as of now, I don't really see there is an issue. I don't see supply is not meeting the demand. I don't think so. I think the two approved drugs, those two companies have invested a lot, and they're really catching up. And as Doug mentioned, there are enough players, CDMOs, CMOs out there who are increasing their capacity to meet the demand. So right now, supply chain wise, I really don't see a big issue other than maybe auto injectors. That's a little different.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Hyung. It's definitely improving with time. I mean, I guess philosophically, you could say that all supply chains are at risk for anything that might be unexpected. I mean, the geopolitical situation is something that we always keep a very close eye on. This concept of tariffs can certainly quickly misguide you as to what's the best place to have your supply chain suppliers located. God forbid we ever got to the point where this country said not only is it going to be a tariff, but now I'm going to say you cannot even do business with that company. Then something like that would be seriously impactful to, I think, our supply chain globally. But for the most part, what we try and do is introduce geographical diversity, corporate diversity, and duplication. We really want to have networks of suppliers that if things go south in one area of the world, we can maybe compensate by dialing up our production in the other side. So it's a lot to juggle. We have to keep our minds focused on what sort of the worst case scenario could be and then have contingency plans for that. But for the most part, I think I would agree that things are certainly getting a whole lot better because so many of these companies are recognizing the fact that barring a catastrophe, GLP-1s are not going away anytime soon. And so they have the confidence to invest in the infrastructure and the resources that are required to make sure that they're a significant player in that whole global supply chain.
So I'll just comment on that also. Just increases the cost, but you need to make sure you have backup vendors available, whether it comes to your raw material or your CDMO or anything else. It's definitely more burden for the organization, but I guess it's required.
Yeah, I completely agree, Deepa. There's my least favorite phrase is I'm single sourced in something because if one of those goes down, the whole process shuts down. So we do quite a bit of thought and implement all sorts of different strategies to make sure that we have backups to our backups even. And again, sometimes like I said, I don't like to call them backups because that implies that one is the main one and the other one's better. I really like to make this concept emphasize to the CDMOs that we are all equal players in this endeavor together, and we have to work harmoniously at the same time. And it's having the quiz up here or the questionnaire about oral GLP-1s. That's another thing that sort of helps diversify us a little bit. When I have a small molecule that's a GLP-1 agonist versus a peptide, that automatically just sort of diversifies my supply chain a little bit because it's a different set of molecules, a different set of suppliers, a different set of presentations. And so that helps. That's one of the things I think that we have the luxury of at Kylera is that I don't have to have just peptide synthesis. I can have both small molecule and peptides, and that helps diversify things.
Now, when we talk about commercial supply, what regulatory issues do you face? Hyung, Doug, like what regulatory issues have you seen or do you anticipate?
Well, I can tell you from my perspective, the one thing about regulatory agencies is that they have a lot more information than I do. about what they need to see, or what they have experienced, or what they have seen from other commercially viable products. So that's one of the things that we try and do is gather as much information as possible as to what are these regulatory agencies expecting. And it's not just from the manufacturing side, it's also from the clinical trial design aspect. You've got to have an understanding of what these agencies are going to expect when your product gets to that point of regulatory approval. And so we try and keep a very close eye on anything that's publicly available information. We try and keep our eyes and ears open to new intellectual property that might show up to give us a hint as to what people are doing to satisfy the requirements of the agencies. But for the most part, I think that, there's not a whole lot of new stuff that's being expected on a regular basis. And so the fact that we have other commercially viable products and available products out there gives us a nice little roadmap. And of course, then as I said earlier, we also have our colleagues in China who have experienced their process going through the regulatory approval system. And so we can, again, leverage that information to decide what we need to focus on at any given time. The hardest is when you're first, because you don't know what they're going to expect.
Yeah. And to add to that, I think as an early stage biotech, and people who are on the development side, it comes to a point where at the end, when you go into commercial, you need to get a GMP certified, CGMP facility. Now, when you're in the early stage, I'm pretty sure a lot of people contacted different CDMOs, but there are great CDMOs that are CGMP certified and have no risk at all to go into that space. But it's expensive. I'll have to be honest with you. It's expensive. Then you have the alternative side where, I don't know, geopolitically, there could be an issue with CGMP certifications in the later stage. FDA was quite interested in India, CDMOs over in India for a while. So which way do you go? I think that's where that complicated question comes up. Early stage, go with a little bit cheaper. Then at one point, when you go into clinical or after when you look at phase 1 safety data, that's when you need to really start transitioning over to a CGMP certified and very solid CMO. And that's when the tech transfer comes into play. That's when the complications start. And I completely agree with Doug. If you have a little bit of a resource, start early. You may go with a little bit of riskier side where they're not that established, or in early stages of your development. But as you go into the IND submission stage, I would recommend that you actually start engaging with your CGMP certified CMO, CDMO to make sure that you're prepared.
And how do you ensure robust tech transfer? How do you make sure that everything is transferred over and you're not impacting the quality there?
So I was going to comment on the previous question first regarding the regulatory. One thing I was going to add, that being the, I guess, FDA advocate, I would say in some ways, FDA is your friend. Reach out to them if you have questions regarding your clinical protocol or your manufacturing. They want to help you. Their goal is also to approve drugs, and FDA is a lot more flexible than EMEA. So I would say, don't hesitate. Don't hesitate. Just connect with them, and they work with you. And I'll leave that aside. Second question you had was regarding the tech transfer. I think coming to the tech transfer, I would suggest my approach is basically make sure you have the CQAs in place. You need to know what your critical quality attributes are, and you understand your process. You have CPPs in place, critical process parameters in place. Go with the mindset to put a protocol together, do the risk analysis, do the protocol together, go with the right approach with acceptance criteria when you're executing this tech transfer. Then typically it's, goes well, it moves very smooth. The second thing is anything that doesn't fit into the criteria, you have time to investigate once you know what you're expecting, what your CQAs are, what your acceptance criteria is If you're not meeting that, then you know what to expect and how to investigate and then move forward with that. And the other thing I was going to suggest with respect to tech transfer, take a stepwise approach, do the pilot batch first before you get into the real tech transfer, or a small size batch first, and then you move to a regular tech transfer. Don't risk your larger batch on the tech transfer unless you are 100% sure about your process is robust and is fully validated. Doug or Mayank?
Yeah, thanks, Deepa. I was going to say I've done dozens of tech transfers over my 36 or 37 years I've been in this business now, and there's really so many things that have to take place, and it depends upon whether you're transferring something that's at a phase 1 stage or a commercial product. There's a different level of complexity and certainly a different level of time that it takes to make those tech transfers. But I would say that just generally, you can't over communicate when it comes to doing a tech transfer with your new CDMO partner. You can't underestimate the importance of having a quality agreement set up early so that you know that you're playing by the same rules. You can't spend too much time feeding them information that you may not think is that relevant, or because you've known it for so long, but it's new to them. And then you can't replace not being on site. You've got to be on site during these tech transfers to really help out. Deepa makes the perfect point, right? Don't do a tech transfer and expect to do your phase 3 commercial batch right out of the gate. You do, feasibility runs, you do engineering runs, you do small scale runs, and then you continue to scale up. So I tell people all the time, a tech transfer isn't like a 2-month process. A tech transfer can take a year or more to do it properly and to get up to speed. So I guess my advice to anybody who's thinking about doing tech transfers, make sure that you allocate adequate resources and adequate time and adequate money to get it done properly. Because if you rush a tech transfer and try and get it done, all you're going to experience is headaches, one right after the other. And that's not necessarily the fault of the CDMO either. A lot of times people want to say, oh, you couldn't make my batch, that CDMO must be no good. If you don't give them good data in to start with, if you don't get them experience, if you don't give them time to get familiar with your process, you're setting them up for failure. And so I think that's the biggest advice I can always give people is when you do a CDMO tech transfer, take the time to do it right. That's one of those situations where you slow down to speed up. Because if you get all those little learnings and hiccups out of the way early, then you can really go to manufacturing efficiently, quickly in the future.
I completely agree with both of you. Time, to me, it's time. You just can't rush anything on tech transfers. Give ample time, a year, a little over, and prepare before you actually execute it. A lot of times, what I experience with tech transfers is that you have a CDMO that you want to transfer to, then they come back with a timeline, and plus, they need the same materials to manufacture, and procurement takes a while, and you can't even start it before they actually get those procurements done. But if you have having your current CDMO stack up on the materials, then you can transfer those and at least save some time as well. So I think the most important is time, and make sure you're prepared.
Well said. We don't have a ton of time left. Oh, Deepa, you want to address that?
Yeah, just my last 2 cents in there. Make sure you take the team approach. Utilize your process development people, tech transfer people, quality people, analytical people. Have a good communication between all of us when you're doing the tech transfer. Because often we tend to ignore that, and you really, you want to be successful in the process. That's my little advice.
So we had an attendee today, Srinivasa, ask a great question, a very basic question, but an important one that I want to pose to the three of you before we conclude for today. They asked, just a basic question: how do we balance quality with demand? And we've talked about a lot of things today, but what's your biggest piece of advice for those in the GLP-1 manufacturing space wondering, okay, what is the key to balancing quality with demand?
So I'll go first. My only one sentence on that: don't cut on quality because the patient is most important. Safety is the most important factor. And know your process well, know your product well. The quality comes in the picture already.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have to agree with Deepa. There is no cutting corners with quality. Quality is number one, and you have to just spend a lot of time in the early development stage to make sure you understand your drug, and make sure you understand the manufacturing process. No cutting corners on quality.
I could respond, but I would be saying the exact same thing as there's no compromise here. Make the quality work, and that just means you got to put the time in early so that when the demand comes, that you have your quality systems and your quality checks and your quality confidence in place.
Well said, the three of you. I want to thank each of you and Deepa for joining us today. We appreciate your expertise. Everybody who attended today, and please visit Pharmaceutical Online to stay up to date on the latest in technology and advancement in GLP-1 manufacturing. Thank you all, and I hope that you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.